Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, incarcerated people are setting themselves alight in one U.S. prison.
If I have to, I don't mind setting myself on fire again. This time I will set my whole body on fire.
The racism and abuse pushing them to put their lives on the line. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. Ikang Ijat is in his 20s, and these days, his voice is heavy with frustration and exhaustion.
Before I have to stay up here and do the rest of my time up here, I would rather die before I stay up here because every day I'm dealing with discrimination.
He's one of several men at Virginia's Red Onion State Prison who reached a breaking point so extreme he attempted to set himself on fire.
On September 15th, 2024, a young African man, Ikang Ijat, and his cellmate Trayvon Brown set themselves on fire at Virginia's remote Supermax Red Onion State Prison.
The news first came from Prison Radio, a network run by people who are themselves incarcerated.
Ikang suffered third-degree burns along his legs and was hospitalized until September 24th for inpatient trauma care, including skin grafts.
It was a few weeks later when Ikang called Prison Radio himself and explained what drove him to such a desperate act.
He started throwing stuff around, and he grabbed my Holy Quran, my Noble Quran, and threw it on the ground. So I started yelling, like, man, I ain't gonna lie. I said, pick my Quran up off the ground. That is my holy scripture. He said, if you don't like it, come off hunger strike.
We reached out to Virginia's Department of Corrections, asking about the reports of self-immolation at Red Onion State Prison. They told us over the phone that no one had self-immolated, but that some prisoners did set themselves on fire. My guest today has talked to Ikang and his family. She says the conditions he's faced are extreme.
People are desperate in Red Onion State Prison because of the conditions and the torture, literal torture. They are setting themselves on fire. They're attacked by dogs. They are having their materials destroyed, and they are being put in solitary confinement and prevented from talking to their lawyers and their families. My name is Noelle Hanrahan. I'm a lawyer and a private investigator. I'm the founder of Prison Radio, a project of the Redwood Justice Fund. I'm based in Philadelphia, and I cover prisons in the United States.
Well, Noelle, it's really good to have you here on The Take. You helped launch Prison Radio as a journalism project more than 30 years ago. So I want to start by asking you to take us to a place that your outlet has been reporting on a lot recently, a place very few people actually want to go to, a high-security prison in a remote, mountainous region of Western Virginia, with kind of a strange name for a detention center, Red Onion. Why is Red Onion on your radar these days?
We've had reports over the last number of years. Actually, one of our main correspondents, Kevin Rashid Johnson, has been reporting from Red Onion State Prison for over a decade.
Prisoners treated worse than dogs. Prisoners such as Curtis Garrett, who put up no resistance, but was mauled by 2 dogs and beaten by guards.
The conditions there are deplorable.
On Christmas Day in 2018, losing the use of an arm and leg as a result.
And they take many people from our inner cities and move them to this very remote location that has almost exclusively white staff, rural county, where the prisoners are almost exclusively people of color.
Okay, deplorable conditions. What are we talking here?
We're talking dogs used on prisoners to intimidate, threaten, and bite them. We're talking about spitting in people's food. We're talking about no respect for people's religious traditions. They cannot kneel to pray. They have their religious materials, such as their Quran or their Bibles, destroyed in front of them. They are brutalized. They are covered in Capsian mace. They are left to not be able to be taken care of in terms of to getting the mace off of them. They are beaten. They are denied access to their families, to phone calls, to reaching the outside world.
Oh, wow. Well, As you pointed out, the reason we know about so many of these conditions is because of Kevin Rashid Johnson, a reporter for Prison Radio, who's been reporting on this prison in particular for many years now.
This is Kevin Rashid Johnson. I'm speaking in the interest of the upcoming prisoner strike set to begin August 21st. Set to carry on.
Right now, Rashid is in solitary confinement at Red Onion, and according to his lawyer, he's been there since early this November. That came just weeks after he broke the story about these men burning themselves, including Ekong.
I met Ekong the day after he returned to Red Onion from the hospital. He had been placed in a cell next to me in the prison's medical department, where I overheard him talking with others about a series of prisoners, including himself, setting fire to themselves. I could not help but ask him what was going on. He told me simply that the racism and abuses, the hard and inhumane conditions at Red Onion were so intolerable that he and others were setting themselves on fire in desperate attempts to be transferred away from the prison. These were not protests, he made clear, but acts of desperation, hoping to get out of an insufferable situation.
We heard from Ekong at the beginning of this episode, but you've also spoken to him and his family. What more can you tell us about his story and how is he doing?
We always work with our correspondents who are in prison and their families, and we work with their lawyers. And we've called his sister, Ekong's sister, we called his mother, and then we spoke with Ekong.
I got 5 years left. They put their hands on me. I wanted to defend myself, but I'm not trying to get no more time, and I'm not trying to let these people kill me. You know what I mean? Trying to say I was resisting or something, trying to find a reason to just put their hands on me.
Ekong and his cellmate lit themselves on fire. And Ekong was in the medical treatment area for 3 days before he was transferred 7 hours on a bus to Virginia Medical Institute for a skin graft. Wow. He said that his cellmate was injured more severely, but we have not been able to reach his cellmate, Trayvon. So there are people who are literally setting themselves on fire. And as you've heard or will hear Ekong state, he is considering doing it again. And my assessment is Ekong is not mentally ill. Ekong is desperate because of the conditions he's facing, because they are macing him for merely asking that people do not step on his Quran or to let him pray or to let him communicate with his family. There are all these tactics that they use to destabilize people, taking away their phone, putting them in isolation, trying to make them crack and break. And our support, our letters, our emails, our phone calls are that lifeline that they need.
When you heard that account, the first account of someone setting themselves on fire in prison, what was your first thought?
I was shocked. I was almost disbelieving. I thought, I know people harm themselves when they're in psychological trauma, but I had not heard of inmates doing a public protest that was conscious, intentional, and directed against the state. It was to force them to transfer him out of there.
And a transfer because of the abuse and the racism he said he was facing. What happens? I wonder if you can explain for people who aren't across how the prison system works, but what happens when someone complains? When Ekong says this officer or this person, authority, stomped on my Quran or called me racist names.
Or spit in my food. Or
spit in my food.
What
happens?
Sprayed me 5 times with a very intense mace. They take the materials and they rip them up in front of you. Oh. They take away your pencils. They tell you no one is going to listen. They give you a process that's circular that doesn't ever work. When we were advocating for Mumia Abu-Jamal's medical care and to get hepatitis C treatment, a cure, which they were denying him, he was desperately in need of the cure to hepatitis C, and they were denying it to him. So they created a system where his grievance, before he could file a lawsuit, his grievance would go on forever, that there was no resolution of the grievance. At first, Mumia Abu-Jamal is a revolutionary incarcerated in Pennsylvania who was on death row for 29 years. So he's written, he's vocal, he's a radio journalist. Mumia fought to get health care. So we had to argue that there was really no process, that it was a sham. And so they do that. And then they brutalize you. They literally say that they will hurt you, they will beat you, and that they then go after the people that you care about and love. They transfer people. So they use every tactic they can to prevent the spotlight from going on them. And when people write and document and engage with the media and call their families, that is when a power is built. It is a power outside of the prison that the prison fears.
So is it just Red Onion, or is there a wider problem? That's after the break. So, Noelle, from the stories that Ekong and Rashid Johnson tell us, this is not an issue of one or two bad apples, which is what you often hear when these types of stories come up. Miriam Nemeth is one of the attorneys for Kevin Rashid Johnson. She talked to us. He's been in and out of Red Onion, and she's heard from him what he's gone through. And here's what she told us.
He has spent his entire time in the Department of Corrections speaking out about what's going on behind the walls, where community members can't see what's happening, and sharing the kind of horrible abuses that are happening throughout the system, but particularly in the Western region, where the guards are notorious for being incredibly racist and really harmful.
So she talks about this being something larger than just this prison, a problem with just this prison. I wonder for you, it sounds like what you're telling me that this is larger than just this prison too. What is happening here?
One of the disturbing things about the culture at Red Onion State Prison and Wallens Ridge is that they're predominantly white, not even predominantly white guards, but 99% white guards. So Kevin Rashid Johnson has told us that the perception on the outside is that there's diversity. There's not. There are Black prisoners and there are white guards. The white guards have Nazi and KKK tattoos on their arms and their bodies and are proud of them. They are unapologetic about, they use the N-word to objectify, and they are in a place that we are a country that has a legacy of 300 years of slavery, and they evoke slavery with the dogs. Dogs were used in the times of slavery to control and to kill people. And they use these animals to attack prisoners in the same way. Prisons like this attract certain types of guards. Our job as reporters is to go where the silence is. Our job as reporters is to hear what people on the ground have to say, where there's unmediated agency from the people inside. In America, 1 in 99 people will do prison time in their lifetime. One in 3 African-American men. So we have poor people of color on an assembly line into this massive system that spends more money. They spend more money on prisons than higher education. They spend more money on prisons than preschools here. And it's become an industry.
It's worth saying that there is some movement to change things, although I think many will argue that it's incremental when you look at the landscape that you just laid out for us and how vast this is. 2 Virginia state senators are demanding answers from the state's Department of Corrections. One of them is Barbara Favola. Senator Favola sent The Take a statement in which she said she's deeply concerned by the reported conditions at Red Onion and at Wallens Ridge State Prison, which is its sister maximum security prison. In her statement, she writes that the reported self-immolation is shocking on many levels, and she called on Virginia's governor to authorize an independent investigation with a corrective action plan that makes Red Onion the type of place that creates a humane and rehabilitative environment. Are you seeing more responses to this issue, especially since the prison radio report have come out? What are you seeing?
We are seeing a lot of people ordering the materials that we have, our postcards, because we are doing a postcard campaign, a call-in campaign. We're seeing media outlets call us. We are seeing the people from inside the prison actually acknowledging that there is an issue. For the first 4 weeks, they didn't acknowledge that this had happened. And so the bright, white, hot spotlight is meaning that the prison is on the defensive. So we are seeing a burgeoning movement to identify this as a problem and to address it. I would say organizations like the Abolitionist Law Center, the Human Rights Campaign, which is prisoner-led, the Abolitionist Law Center, which is prisoner-led, Rights Behind Bars, the attorney for Kevin Rashid Johnson works for that organization. They're working with communities and they're working as lawyers. I went to law school after being a journalist in order to advocate for the people that are inside. It wasn't enough just to broadcast their voices. They have to come home.
What are these men calling for, and what do you expect to happen with that call?
The immediate call is for a transfer out of Red Onion State Prison. And I do believe that that is going to be successful. I think those pressure points are going to work. I think it's going to take a lot, and it might take time. The next step, I'm not sure. It's really got to come from them. So we're going to listen, we're going to talk to them, and we're going to take their lead, and we're going to talk to their families. It's a very large problem, the way in which this industry is constructed. And so it will take a lot, but we are going to keep our ear to the ground, keep reporting, and bring it to the people.
And that's The Take. We want to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What came to mind for you during this conversation? Let us know in the comments below. Our team really does read through them. We'll see you tomorrow.